Oh, man, I can't believe it. Is it finally going to happen? It all depends on which computer model you ask, when, where, how much. We've got a Carolina snowstorm to talk about. This is the Carolina Weather Group. Let's get started. It's Wednesday, January the 8th. The year is 2025. Snow is finally returning to the Carolinas. Some of you are like, what are you talking about? We get snow all the time. I live in the mountains, or maybe I live up along, I don't know, Mount Airy or something near the Virginia line. But for those of us who live in Charlotte, we haven't seen snow now for over 1,000 days, 1,070 some odd days. Brad Panovich will be here in a few minutes from WCNC Charlotte to tell us exactly how many days it has been. We've also got Tim Buckley. He's the chief meteorologist at WFMY in Greensboro. We're going to get to him in just a moment, but I'm very excited because we're going to get into some of the nuances here. But people are tuning in right now live with us on YouTube, on Facebook, and they're just like, dude, how much snow are we going to see? It's a complicated answer, but here's one possible scenario for you. We could see maybe an inch of snow here in Charlotte. Tim will tell us if he agrees with us too in a minute, because he might not. Maybe he does. We'll find out. And the mountains, 2, 3, 4, maybe locally 5 inches of snow. And our own Frank Strait in Columbia will tell us how far south this will march on in to South Carolina. We know Scotty Powell's on with us tonight, and he's going to want some snow in Myrtle Beach. Is he going to get it? Probably not, but we'll ask him anyway.
Hey, don't be so negative.
So we'll try to get as many of your places as possible. We're also going to talk about some real life impacts, right? Because snow can be fun, but snow can have real impacts to your everyday, school, business, work, all that good stuff. And ice. Ice is a problem, and some of these places are going to get ice. So, Tim, without further ado, how much snow are you going to get in Greensboro?
Oh gosh, to the 10th of an inch, maybe.
Yeah, could you forecast it right down to the second, please?
How about 2.05 inches? Does that sound good to everybody?
That sounds fabulous.
You know, hey, it's funny. So we don't have the fancy snow streak anymore because we got 0.2 inches of snow back on Sunday.
Which counted.
It did count, and we got 0.4 in December. So we have 0.6 for the year here in the Grand Triad, but you got to go all the way back to the same date for y'all. I guess it was January 29th, 2022.
Well, the official timekeeper's back. Brad, was it 1,075 days?
I believe for us it's 1,075 days as of today.
Okay. Sorry, Tim, I cut you off and put him on the spot.
No, it's cool. It's the same day. You know, that month of January 2022,
was epic.
We had like 3 or 4 smallish kind of events. And we're having another one right now. And this is kind of exciting for a lot of folks because, again, we haven't had an area-wide snow in a while. We just had a little bit of an event back on Sunday, which only impacted the northern part of our area. So if all you want to know is how much snow you're going to get, I guess we can give you this graphic. But there's always a caveat. These things can change. We put this out there this afternoon. You know, the biggest question mark that I have is, where does the sleet go? You deal with enough of these storms over a while. I don't know if I've ever seen a storm where the sleet goes less north than expected. It usually goes more north than expected. So we'll see how it happens this time around. But what we're expecting is if you live kind of north and west of I-85, you have a pretty decent shot of 2 to 3 inches around here, which is pretty good snow. Right? That's kind of hard to do in recent years. Farther south and east, you know, maybe you're in Asheboro, it's going to be harder because there will be more mixing. And when we're talking about this storm, it's more in the way of that sleet mix than the freezing rain, at least for my part of the state. There could be a little bit of icing, but it's more or less going to be that snowfall. And if you get just a little bit of warm air, maybe 1/10 of a degree above freezing above the ground, that can partially melt the snowflake, and then you can have a sleet pellet instead. And that kind of puts an end to your accumulation. So this is mostly going to fall Friday night. Starting afternoon, going through the overnight hours, and then switching over somewhere around midnight to that sleet mix for our southern counties. And then Saturday morning, I mean, feels like the storm is coming tonight. It's not. 2 days away. Oh boy. Saturday morning, I should say, the sun comes out by like 8, 9 o'clock. So this is really a Friday night storm. And then Saturday, we're just picking up the pieces, right? The plows will do their work on the main roads. You should be okay. Hopefully you can build a tiny snowman. If you're a snow lover, there's probably not as much snow as you want, but maybe you're not picky after a couple years, right? So the pretty exciting stuff, I think.
I'll take anything we get. I like Tammy's question on Facebook. Which is better, snow or sleet? I think it depends who you ask, Tammy. If you're a snow lover, you want snow. Sleet's the thing that epically disappoints everyone south of Interstate 85.
Yeah, sleet is
south
lousy.
of Interstate 85. It epically disappoints everyone south of I-80. They hate sleet up in State College, PA. Trust me.
Ooh. They sure do.
Frank, you had a screen share. I'm going to try to put up on the screen here too to give us a little insight here. What do you got? What do you got for us?
Yes, that is the
numbers.
number of days since it last snowed in Charlotte. 1,074 as of yesterday. So days 1,075, and it is the longest such stretch on record.
And that's the same number that, as Tim said, you guys have in Greensboro in so many areas. Tim, I think you put it really well when you said, this is one of the first, if not the first, wide area event we've had since 2022 when we had 3 or 4 weekends in a row. And you know what? You also said something that was reminding me, I know at least by that third event, by the time the sun came out, the snow was like melting on my lawn in the sun. The kids were trying to sled and I was trying to use a shovel to like make piles of snow so they could go down. But you need like a shady hill if you want to be out past the sunshine, because like you said, the sun's going to be coming out, and will that start to melt things, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the sun can always melt stuff. So I think there will probably be a little bit of melting on Saturday in the sunny spots. But I'll tell you, if my recommendation would be this: you got a sidewalk, you've got a driveway, you'd better be out there shoveling on Saturday in the sunshine, because if you wait, once you get to Saturday night, it's going to get down again to right around 20 degrees. Speaking from some experience, if you let that snow harden up, you're not going to have an easy time moving it anymore. The best time to shovel is right away. So I wouldn't delay with that until you get to, use that sunshine to help you out, I would say. Probably my biggest concern for just people's safety, and Brad was talking about this earlier, it looks to me like Friday afternoon and Friday evening could be kind of dicey here. We're getting those short range models coming in. They're trending a little bit quicker. If you get this to start up at 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock with the snowfall, especially with that thumping, warm air advection push, that could be some decent snow and heavy snow even for a time. And if any of that gets on the roadways, it's going to make a mess of the evening commute. So I'm thinking that the schools will have some choices. I think, just commuters will have some choices to make. We saw last weekend, it doesn't take much snow to cause big problems, and you could have that going on for Friday afternoon. So it's better to know about it now than to let it sneak up on you. But I do have concern about people, crashing on the highways or getting caught in it. You don't want to be caught in it Friday afternoon.
Yeah, certainly not. And it's a good thought when we think about impact. I know you've got to run here in a second, Tim, and then we're going to get to other parts of the Carolinas. What can people expect out of WFMY if they're in that Greensboro, Triad area?
Yeah, sure. So in case you missed, our overall, accumulation forecast right now, 1 to 3 inches probably. I think the maximum we could see in a boom scenario with this would be around 4 inches maybe. We're only going to work with about 4/10 of an inch of liquid at most, so that would probably be the best you could do, and that's probably north and west. But yeah, as we're going to hold your hand through the system. We're going to be walking you through it on our newscast throughout the day. It's a daytime event, that's kind of nice, but we'll go through Friday night with you as well, and we'll be on our WFMY Plus channel. Plus, we all love a plus, right? If you have a Roku TV or a Fire TV, you can download it for free, and it's free news anytime you want. We'll have some hourly updates going through the nighttime for you.
Fabulous.
Tim, don't forget, throw a snowball at Christian for his birthday today when it snows.
Christian Morgan's birthday today, everybody. So a happy birthday to him.
Birthday.
We can't sing happy birthday. The copyright on it is insane.
That may be the one song we actually can sing. Is that public domain? It might be public domain.
Yeah. We've got a question on Facebook for how much snow South Carolina is going to see. Samantha, stay tuned. We're going to get to South Carolina as soon as possible. Tim, we appreciate your perspective. Another guy who will be on his own Plus app here in Charlotte, Brad Panovich, chief meteorologist at WCNC Charlotte. Brad, same question to you. How much snow can Charlotte see?
If you had to, I don't know, if I had to gamble on it, I'd say around 1 inch to 1.5 inches. But we're kind of going in that trace. I mean, I know this seems really like we're copping out, but a trace to like 3 inches is kind of, if I could just put a blanket total out there, I would do that. But you see, we're kind of on Charlotte's in that 1 to 2, almost a trace range. So, yeah, I think today what I did is I actually looked through, and this, don't ever do this if you're not really bored or you don't love snow. I looked through all 103 ensemble members of the GFS, the ensemble, the CMC, and then I looked at the national blend of models. And I wanted to do a giant model blender basically. And I think it came out to like 1.4 inches for Charlotte was the mean with all of those members. So I think that's a really good starting point. And I think I'm pretty confident we're going to see measurable snow just because of how cold it is. Tim mentioned this, and this is really honestly my biggest concern is I think in the Charlotte metro area, this is going to start mid to late afternoon, if not during the evening rush. Soil temperatures right now, um, they're really cold. I don't think I've seen the soil temperatures this cold. For such a long period of time. And with tonight's low in the teens and tomorrow night's lows in the 20s, the soil temperatures are like 33, 34 degrees in some areas, which is about 2 inches down. So you can imagine the roads are even colder. And so when this stuff falls, it's gonna stick immediately. And what we've seen in some of these recent events like these light snow events, when there's a lot of traffic, the traffic tires will melt the initial snow and then it'll refreeze and it becomes this sheet of ice. And if you get one car to slide off or you get a traffic jam and the salt brine plow trucks can't get out, it becomes one of these snow jams, which is kind of my fear on Friday evening, that just the amount of people and snow crossing over is never a good thing.
Well, you mentioned brining. We got this video today from the South Carolina Department of Transportation. You can see they've got one out here on the interstate preparing their roads. You're maybe seeing this where you live. Go ahead. Wait, I'm sorry. Hang on. Say that one more time.
I was gonna say that's a lot of brine. That thing was not like being cheap on it. It was pumping it out.
Well, they've got it all built up. Who's needed in
Look
the
at
last
that.
3 years? That is a lot of brine.
I mean, that is like gushing out of it. If that was those cars behind, I'd be like, oh, I'm washing my car immediately.
Yeah, well, we also got this video a little closer to home. This is Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Yes, they do in fact have their own snow plows, their own snow fighting equipment. You can see them getting ready here today in these lovely beauty shots they sent over because
Is
travel
that
will be
cinematic
impacted.
stuff? That's
I
amazing.
know. Who is this
Mhm.
photographer at the Charlotte Douglas International Airport?
Wow.
These are lovely shots. It's going to be a bit of a mess there on Friday, I presume, Brad.
Yeah, I think, here's the thing. American is the biggest hub here. It's also the biggest hub in Dallas Fort Worth, which guess who's getting the storm first? Tomorrow. So I can imagine just between those two hubs being impacted by snow and ice, you're going to have massive delays, if not cancellations. One of the thing with airports and snow and ice, it's not the runways that actually end up being an issue. It's the de-icing of the planes themselves, which if you don't have a lot of de-icing equipment, it takes a long time. So each plane's got to stop on the tarmac, get de-iced, and then take off. And it just slows every takeoff and landing forever.
Brad, I don't know how long we have you for. I know Tim just had to hop off
Yeah,
to get to some TV things there. So I do want to ask this one question, and then I promise
sure.
everyone who's watching we will get to more locations because that is the $1 million thing that everyone
Yeah,
wants. But there is a question in chat right now that I thought was really pertinent. It's from
yeah.
Jonathan. I think he's watching on Tim's Facebook page. How much dry air are we going to have to combat in this storm?
Well, it's interesting. It's not the dry air that's sitting over us now. That actually is going to help cool things down because it's going to allow for what we call wet bulbing. The dry air we're worried about is more kind of like a dry slide. If you're familiar with meteorology, it's the flow of moisture into the storm from the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. That looks to be kind of shut off a little bit, not a perfect setup. And part of the reason is the storm system is not phasing. We call it the northern piece of energy and the southern piece aren't completely phasing. So the tilt of this trough is what we call a positive. It's not as back or tilted back to the west or negative as we'd like to pull in more moisture. So to answer that question, it's really not the dry air over us right now that actually will favor a snow sleet start. It's the fact that there's dry air being evected into the system once it starts to develop. It's not really tapping into the full potential of moisture coming in from the ocean.
You mentioned, Brad, how big this storm system is. We know the National Weather Service here in the Carolinas today went ahead and started issuing their winter storm watches out for a large portion of the area. And if you're watching this back or listening to the podcast later, this is probably subject to change. But really, what I want to show you is I want to zoom this out. And I think, Brad, I'm going to steal this from you. I think you said this earlier today, but from Dallas to Dallas, from Dallas, Texas to Dallas, North Carolina, we've got these warnings, advisories, watches out because this, as you mentioned, is a huge storm system. I have a question. I don't know the answer. It might be a dumb question if I'm terribly wrong, but we know in California they've got the Santa Ana winds right now, which are made up by a high pressure and a low pressure kind of funneling these winds in. That low pressure as it tracks off to the east, is that the same low pressure system that's going to produce all of this winter weather?
Yeah, that's kind of like a connection to the wildfires. There was a low over Baja California that's being injected into Texas now that's going to become this storm that actually combined with the high off the west coast helped channel those Santa Ana winds. So believe it or not, part of the same system that caused the firestorm is actually going to help create the snow here across the south.
Yeah, this is just absolutely. We're going to talk more about those fires coming up in a little bit here, but sticking with the winter weather theme, you can see this all stretched out across the entire southeast here. What a massive storm impact this is going to be as we head on through the rest of the week. Let's show this again. These are the numbers from the National Weather Service that can kind of show you across North Carolina. Ranging as far as eastern North Carolina, maybe a dusting across portions of the Triangle and Triad, maybe 2 inches. As Brad mentioned, maybe an inch. We know it's definitely going to be more snow north of Uptown than south of Uptown because that darn I-85 boundary seems to get us every single time. And then you could see maybe 3, 4, 5 inches locally in the mountains. Frank Strait is with us. He's keeping an eye on things from Columbia, South Carolina. We know that the National Weather Service there does have their official forecast out. Frank, what are you watching as you're putting together your forecast for South Carolina?
Well, things are a lot more complicated down here in South Carolina because there's more variables and the potential for it to get warm and above 32 at the surface as well. So it just makes for a really complicated forecast and a lot of variables that make things really challenging to get right. Now, for those of you along I-85 in the upstate, those of you who are in that area, you're going to get some snow. The situation is a lot like what Brad explained for Charlotte in upstate South Carolina. Maybe the cold air gets wedged in and stays dammed in a little bit better in the upstate of South Carolina than it would in Charlotte. And so maybe the snow could hang on a little bit longer. So we're kind of thinking 1 to 3 inches of snow along there. That's what the Weather Service has out right now. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Then as you go further south, you get more mixing with more sleet and freezing rain, and so the snow accumulations are less. And along I-20, you get to the point where the cold air just doesn't really hang on that well, and we end up with maybe a little bit of snow and sleet at the onset, and then it quickly goes to maybe a little tinkly drizzle for a while with temperatures probably 33. That's the way it usually goes in these situations around here. And with some areas further north up in the upstate or toward the upstate up 26 and up 77, a little freezing drizzle there maybe with temperatures staying below freezing. And then the second wave of precipitation comes in with the cold front. And that's where you start seeing the mixing occurring up the upstate. Now, like I said, there are multiple variables here, and the models are kind of weird. The new high-res rapid refresh just came in, and this is pretty interesting what it's doing here. Now, since it doesn't get to Columbia until 10 or 11 a.m., maybe it starts out as a little bit of rain here instead, but then the precipitation cools the atmosphere by evaporation. That's the wet bulbing that Brad was just talking about, and gets it to the point where what's actually falling is snow aloft starts reaching the surface. And look at it here in Columbia. This model's trying to thump on us for maybe 30 minutes here and causing a little bit of heavy snow. It's the only model I've seen doing that, but it's not an unreasonable possibility, but only one of the possibilities that can happen here. Like, for example, going over to this model, which the 0Z run isn't in far enough. I have to back up to 18Z for this one, but it doesn't really show that much precipitation this far south. And so all the exciting stuff happens further north, and we get, little rain, maybe a little sleet mixed in down here in Columbia, and that's that. So two different models, two different ideas totally for what might happen in Columbia. So that's the first wave with a warm front that's lifting north, although we don't really feel it because that warm front kind of goes over the wedged in cold air near the surface. That all happens above 2,000 feet, close to the surface here where we're living. The cold air kind of stays locked in, even here in Columbia. And when the second wave comes in, it's close to freezing. And, down here, there's some areas that are not really, they're seeing freezing rain. Some other areas are not. Going south and east here from Columbia, you're going to see almost all rain. Scotty, looks like it's just a rain event for him. Down in Charleston, all rain probably. Maybe a little bit of sleet at the onset, but that's probably as much as you get. But again, the further north and west you go, the more you get into the freezing rain and eventually sleet and snow. The concern I have, in addition to the snow, again, 1 to 3 inches along 85, some spots further north can get more. Maybe Sassafras or Jocassee or Caesar's Head gets 6 inches, but that may be a stretch because it looks like it can mix that far north. But somewhere north of Columbia, northwest of Columbia, but south probably of I-85, there's going to be an area that gets the freezing rain as being dominant, and there's going to be a band somewhere in there where the ice accretion is probably going to go up to around 1/4 inch, and that's not great because that's where you really start stressing the trees and power lines, and we might see some branches come down, some trees which may already be weakened from Helene. It's one of the things you got to think about here. We just had essentially a hurricane come through a few months back, and some of the trees may be in a weakened state from that, so that may help more than you would think with only 1/4 inch of ice accretion. More of that stuff may be impacted and it may come down. So something we have to watch out. Now, the saving grace here is that this cold air layer near the surface is going to be relatively thick, which may end up favoring sleet more. I hope so that we don't have to deal with as many of these power outages and down trees and maybe debris on the road from that. But a mix of sleet and freezing rain can make the roads real slick. Or just freezing rain can make the roads real slick. As Brad mentioned, the ground's relatively cold, so there's concern not just for the bridges and overpasses in the southern upstate over toward Rock Hill, Lancaster, Chester, maybe Chesterfield, that area, and southwestward into Newberry and back toward McCormick and Abbeville counties. Those areas may end up seeing it get icy, not just on the bridges and overpasses, but maybe more of the roads, maybe all of the roads, if it stays cold enough. So that's one of the things we have to watch out for. But again, like I said, a lot of variables here, and we still don't really have the greatest handle on what's going to happen from basically Columbia on north toward Rock Hill and up toward the GSP area. You get to the other side of 85, it looks like it's going to be mainly snow and sleet, and that's going to be okay. One of the things that we have to watch out for is the weather behind the storm. This is not a situation where it's bitterly cold for days and days like it was for the 88 storm that you hear us mention here on Carolina Weather Group every now and then. But it is going to be cold behind it. We'll do some melting Saturday afternoon with the sun probably popping out. And then it goes down around 20 in the upstate at night. So we get refreezing and, well, really a lot of South Carolina. And this will be the case up in North Carolina, too. It gets well below freezing. And so you get refreezing, and there'll be slick spots Sunday morning. And then we thaw things out for a while Sunday afternoon. Probably in South Carolina, mostly melt everything. But this may not be the case in the upstate, especially northwest of 85. And so maybe Monday morning, we again have slick spots as it goes back down to the 20s. So the post-storm weather is going to be something to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the bus stop forecast tomorrow, Thursday morning here in Charlotte, and it's 21 degrees, which is absolutely just bone chilling. On the screen right now, and Frank, you mentioned this, is the possible ice accumulation. This is the National Weather Service's forecast for South Carolina. And, it's kind of in line where we think that snow handoff will be to ice. And, we hope you get more of beautiful snowflakes than you get ice, because that's where things really, really start getting serious. And I think that magic number, if I recall correctly, is closer to that 1/4 inch amount. But you can see these are some pretty significant amounts of ice accumulation. I keep wanting to say accretion And you can see some of that will also work its way into North Carolina. I think the $1 million question is exactly where we hand off from snow to freezing rain and ice or sleet, and that's kind of as Frank just mentioned, we're kind of right here on Wednesday night, right at the beginning of having a good confidence on what this forecast will be. It's coming into clearer picture. I know Brad's been using his weather forecasting rules, right, Brad? So as we come here into about 3 days out, you're starting to get a better picture, but it's still changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as you get closer, a lot more knowns come into the picture, but there's still some unknowns, and Frank highlighted a couple of those. It's those dreaded mix areas. You know, it's going to be some mixing, but how much? Because sleet and freezing rain are both pretty horrible on the roads, but they really reduce your snow totals. It is an interesting system. We talked earlier about the lack of moisture, but that lack of moisture is also going to reduce the what we call the warm nose. The warm nose, well, if you've ever heard that term, it's a warm layer aloft that comes in that creates freezing rain and shuts the snow off. But that's also what transports a lot of the moisture into the region. So the fact that we don't have a really strong warm nose is also partially the reason we don't have a ton of moisture coming into this system. So I think the icing is kind of interesting. Frank mentioned that the cold layer is pretty thick, and I agree with him that that's why I think we're seeing some of those ice totals. It probably could be a close call between all sleet or freezing rain. I hope we don't see freezing rain because there's certainly going to be snow or sleet before the freezing rain starts. And if you've ever seen snow or sleet and then got freezing rain on top of it, it's essentially like a glacier. It creates
Hmm.
some crazy conditions, especially on flat surfaces like roads, bridges, decks, and stuff like that, because a lot of that's going to happen in the middle of the night when it's definitely going to be cold enough that it would be freezing, right? The good news is you don't see totals that approach that quarter inch, which is the magic threshold for power outages to trees. I've gotten a lot of questions like Frank have about trees and power lines because of Helene. I'm not really overly concerned with that because there's just not, frankly, enough moisture to get to that quarter inch threshold and have snow or sleet because we're in that kind of quarter half inch of liquid equivalent, which if that a lot of that's going to snow or sleet, you just don't have a lot left over to create a ton of ice accretion.
Well, I know from watching you and working with you, Brad, you're always saying, the cold air's got to get here first and then the moisture. And boy, is the cold
Yeah.
air going to be getting here the next day or two because it's
Yeah,
so cold.
normally that's why, when a lot of people were talking about the last system, which did bring ice to the mountains and snow north, people were getting excited for that snow. That was the system that really ushered in the cold air. I would say probably 9 times out of 10, the first system that brings in the cold pattern is not the one that gives you the snow. It's the follow-on system, and this is that follow-on system. So, boy, I tell you what, the trough though, guys, I love that you guys are hinting at what's happening beyond this. I mean, the cold air sticks around for a while. This is not. I think there could be more interesting pattern setups here later
I
into the
agree.
month. It doesn't look
Yeah.
like we're going back to a southeast ridge and a blowtorch anytime soon.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be 2 or 3 weeks probably
Yeah,
before we go into the warm pattern, which is what you'd expect in a La Nina winter, like we kind of sort of have going now. You expect February to be warm and long range. My impression of the long range is that's how it's going to happen. But we have to get through the next 3 weeks first. And I think Brad's right. This is probably not the last opportunity we have for a winter
No,
storm down here.
it's like
yeah.
January 2022.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Sort
those
of.
weren't huge systems, but we had three in a row. I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah.
maybe we
That
get
was our last
something
snow
similar.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a look at the Climate Prediction Center, as we mentioned, below normal as we go through the next
Yeah.
almost 2 weeks here. Scotty Powell is in Myrtle Beach keeping an eye on things. Scotty, do you think there's any chance you guys get anything other than rain?
I do believe so. I think at the onset there is the potential, especially across like the areas towards Florence, up into Dillon and Marlborough County, up around Lumberton, Laurinburg, that we could see some snow, sleet mixture to start off, and kind of that dividing line of when do you transition over to one precip type over the other. Even here at the beach, our in-house model, the Barron model, has been hinting at a little bit of snowfall to start here, maybe in the form of some light snow showers or flurries. No like thumping of snow like we're talking about back into North Carolina, but it is interesting to see if that plays out. Um, I think by late Friday night, everything, especially along the coast, does switch back to rain. It's kind of that Interstate 95 corridor where Florence is located back towards Darlington, Timmonsville, Bennettsville, Cheraw, up into Laurinburg and Lumberton is like, where does that ice rain line set up? Because it's kind of drifted around that area, and you can see this is the expected snowfall forecast. You can see Rockingham, Fayetteville. That's kind of like borderline with our forecast area. So by no means is this going to be a big winter storm or an ice storm or anything like that down here across the Grand Strand and the PD. But I do think we have that potential to see maybe a light glaze in some of our north or our northern and western PD communities up into the border belt regions. And then even here at the coast, I mean, I would not be surprised at all to see a few random snowflakes or see some sleet pellets fall from time to time, especially at the onset of this, but then quickly kind of change over to rain as we get into Friday evening. So it better do something, because I kind of went on air a couple weeks ago and said I feel like this is a favorable pattern over the next month or so that we could see a little winter mix. So I gave everybody the date of January 23rd when I thought we'd see some snowflakes fall
23rd.
across our forecast area. And
Is this
so
some folklore you're subscribing to?
no, we just kind of did a little, the anchors and we kind of talked about it, and I kind of threw out January 23rd. So I hope we do see some, so that way I get some brownie points for our people down here. So,
Okay.
but like you guys said, obviously upstate South Carolina, Western North Carolina, the Piedmont, definitely going to see a lot more wintry weather than we will down here at the coast. But I think at the onset, we could see a few snowflakes or sleet pellets before things kind of transition over to rain.
Brad, is there anything we're forgetting about that we haven't hit upon yet?
Well, I think, and we kind of hinted at it, but I think this is actually, I mean, I'll even be the first to admit it. Guys, it's cold.
It's so cold.
We've got, there were some great questions. I saw Alex Purdue in our chat actually asked this on YouTube. It's like, what's a cold weather advisory, right? It's the first time we've had these this year, right? They replaced the old wind chill advisories because they're issued for both cold and wind chills now. And we've got some of our first ones of the season issued for parts of the Carolinas. And basically it means either the wind chill or the air temperature is going to be close to 10 or below. So that's really, really cold. And we've had consecutive nights of low 20s, upper teens, and maybe 3 or 4 nights in a row. I talked about it when I was talking about the soil temperatures, but boy, this has been, to me, one of the longest below average stretches I've seen in a long time for any time of the year, let alone winter time. I saw we got a troll in our comments too. I won't address exactly some of the troll comments, but I heard this a lot going in this. Oh, it's winter, right? It's supposed to be cold. Yeah, this is the coldest part of winter in right now. And we're 10 to 15 degrees below that.
Right.
So it tells you that's super cold. Imagine being 10 to 15 degrees above in the heart of the summer. That would be like 100-degree heat for like 2 weeks straight. It's like, this is no joke. Makes it super cold for us.
Well, it certainly feels cold. I'm going to go, I think, light a fire in the fireplace after this. Scotty?
Can I? Yeah, I was going to comment, kind of piggyback off what Brad was saying. Down here across the Grand Strand and the PD, we've got multiple facilities in each of our coverage area and counties that are opening warming centers for folks to come seek refuge in from out of the cold. So this is, like Brad said, you're 10, 15 degrees colder than what you should be. If you put that in the summertime hotter than it should be, you get the same effect. So it is cold. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We were in the low 20s, upper teens here at the coast, and so that's just not something you really think happens down here.
Yeah.
So
I'm
it's
going
a
to be
very
a little bit
cold
of a grass
environment.
nerd, and Scotty, you can relate to this. So you play a lot of golf. You got Bermuda greens
Yeah.
down there, Bermuda grass. This is the most dormant I've seen the Bermuda grass go in our
Yes.
area in a long time. It is like a color of brown I haven't seen in many winters.
It's funny you say that, Brad,
Oh.
because most of the golf courses down here in Myrtle Beach shut down yesterday, and they're closed throughout the rest of the weekend into next week just because of the cold weather. And they're putting tarps and coverings out on the greens and
Yeah.
trying to save the courses down here. So it's borderline very, very cold where it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and let's
Well,
not
it's
forget
not
all
only
the
the
folks
cold.
in the mountains that are still recovering from
Yes.
Helene, some of them not in proper shelter. that are going through this cold snap. So that's a really crucial part of this.
Yeah, and it's not only the cold; it's also been dry along South Carolina's coast. And
Hmm.
we haven't. It's lately been dry, and you think, well, we've had two hurricanes and that potential tropical cyclone, but outside of those events, it hasn't rained very much at all
Nope.
across South Carolina since May. So it's not just the cold making things dormant; it's also that it's been most of the time dry for months now.
Yeah, let's see. We had a comment here a second ago. It said coldest stretch. Richard says coldest stretch since moving to Myrtle Beach in 2021. Also, I got this comment from Blair watching on Facebook, and Brad, I thought of your forecast because it says any chance that it ramps up in higher
Ooh.
accumulations. And I know you're doing that on TV. You're kind of doing this like bell curve thing.
Yeah. Like we call it the boomer bust. It's a probability curve of what's the highest chance, the lowest chance. And there's always a chance it could fluff up. I think with the dry, cold air, you might get some higher snowfall, the liquid ratios, which could help get you more snow. The one thing that would, I think, drive up the numbers, and that would be if the storm somehow slows down and intensifies a little bit, and we get like a frontal, not to get too geeky, frontal genic band or some
This is a
kind of
geeky
form.
space.
Yeah. So we get frontal genesis forming on the northwest side, that band that forms sometimes on the low. So if the low should spin up on the coast, let's say it decides to like all of a sudden deepen, and we get a band of heavy, frontal genesis on the northwest side of the low, there might be a heavy snow band that sets up somewhere, but it doesn't really show up in any of the guidance. And because it's so fast moving and it kind of goes out to sea before that happens, I don't see it happening. But that would be the one, if there's going to be a wild card, something like that happening where it decides to slow down and spin up and we get a northwest band that forms.
And I love Brad used the word guidance instead of models because we could go on another show and talk about this, but a lot of people are just specifically showing these deterministic models, and I've seen so much flip flopping over the last 5 days. It's crazy. Just remember
Yeah,
when you're
Hmm.
following sources, models is not the gospel. It's just guidance. It's just one of the
yeah.
tools in the tool belts that we have.
For sure,
Yeah,
Scotty. Yeah, my biggest
absolutely.
pet peeve is like there's more products in the models or the guidance than just the snowfall maps.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes the snowfall maps don't match the other parameters in the guidance. And so I really have a lot of respect for meteorologists who break down like vorticity and thicknesses and soundings if they're going to talk about long range. When I just see a straight up 10-to-1 snowfall map, I cringe.
I told Brad he
Yeah.
could have a
Hey,
whole half an hour just ranting.
yeah, James,
Yeah.
switch over. Let me give an
Yeah,
example of
sure.
for right now. Switch over back to my screen share
Okay.
there. Okay,
Okay.
the same time. This is 19Z tomorrow, 2 p.m. This is what the HER model looks like. I just showed you this a little while ago. The 3 kilometer dam 0Z run is now in that far. This is the same time step. Look how it looks
Yeah.
dramatically different. It's so much less moisture on the model. So just because showing one model or even a couple of models can't really give you an idea of what's actually going to happen. And no model has been without sin in this situation. The
Oh,
Euro has not been particularly good, and we always talk
no.
about King Euro and how great it is on social media, but not necessarily this time. I don't think it's done particularly well, at least not for us here in the Carolinas. Of
Yeah,
course,
and let's be
until
honest,
the
it
event
really
happens, we won't really know for sure. But
That's true.
yeah. But it is interesting, because I think all of them have their warts and flaws, but that's why the ensembles and looking at a totality of the data is always the best setup in these situations. And some of the stuff that's interesting that you look at in some of the guidance is, how fast the system is moving and, the tilt to the trough and those kind of things. But I do think there are some wild cards still let to happen here, or that have to happen because the storm, let's be honest, hasn't really formed yet. And I think
Mhm.
tomorrow when we see this thing kind of forming over Texas, we'll have a little bit better idea as it heads our way. And in all this, I would be remiss if we just didn't talk about the psychology of snow in the South in general and the fact that it's been 3 years. So it makes everything we talk about even more heightened. If this was our third or fourth snowstorm of the season, I don't think there would be as much buzz or as much talk. It's been a long time. And when this snow drought started, guys, I knew the first time we had a legit chance of snow, it was going to be absolutely crazy online. And sure enough, it is.
And here we are.
Yes.
Well, that won't stop me from standing out in the snow and hopefully getting snow and
No, and
enjoying
I've
every
said
minute
this
of it.
a bazillion times the last couple of days. Like even Anchor's kind of giddingly laughed. It's like, Brad, you look like you love this, and I said, I really do love snow. As a meteorologist, my first love of weather was a snowstorm, but also especially after hurricane and all the horrible things I've covered in my career,
Yeah.
snow. As long as you don't be an idiot on the road, it's a pretty harmless event, right? Nobody's going to lose their house. Nobody's going to, you know, destroy property. It's if you stay inside and just heed the warnings and do the right things, people can enjoy this. You sled, you snowmobile, you have hot cocoa. I mean, all the things you remember as a kid and the things about snow. It's actually one of these things that people enjoy, and it's not death and destruction like we often have to cover as a meteorologist. So I fully enjoy it.
And we know we've had plenty of that. We'll have some Helene headlines in just a moment. So plan accordingly, settle in, get comfortable, and plan because Joseph is with us in Greensboro. Joseph Navin and Joseph, you were planning to go cover the governor's inauguration, which yet again isn't happening.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, it's Darth Vader, everybody.
Yeah.
Joseph's been waiting very patiently to tell us about the impacts to the inauguration event here for North Carolina's new governor, and his AirPods are not behaving. I don't know, toggle off and back on again, or switch to an internal mic, or just sign to us or something. I don't know. That's
What
my
now?
favorite moment of the whole
I don't
day.
think we
Right
could
there.
pay for that audio filter. That was pretty good.
Right.
What now?
Oh, okay. Your lip flap is off, meaning your voice and your mouth
Let me
don't
just take
match.
this
But
off.
we can hear you, and it's a
How
podcast. So
about
yeah,
this?
go ahead and talk.
How about just normal, non Bluetooth?
Okay.
But yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm not actually from the South. I'm from Ohio originally. So it's very interesting how they have the how they handle snow down here in the first place. But yeah, so in 2017, Governor Cooper, who just left office, was sworn in, and they canceled his ceremonial events because of snow. I don't know. I wasn't around here in 2017, but for whatever
We used to get
amount of
snow.
snow they got, I always maybe around 4 inches in Raleigh at the time.
Ceremonial.
And they canceled that, and all those outside ceremonies, and then they but then the problem is that this time around, so earlier today, the new Governor Stein, announced that they are canceling his outdoor inauguration ceremonies. So that's
Yeah.
2 times in a row. And obviously we had COVID in 2020, so when Cooper was reelected. So now that means that there hasn't been an inaugural ceremony outside in Raleigh since 2013.
Wow. That's a long time
So
ago.
it's a very interesting dynamic now, because last time, if you look for that ceremony, it's now 2013, which would have been McCroy. So there's some interesting repetition, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Every I don't know.
I think what I hear you saying, Joseph, is the next governor, when he holds or she holds their inauguration in Raleigh, it's going to snow again. So we should just put that
I
on the
mean,
calendar
that's the
now.
pattern so far.
That's the pattern. Yeah. One last question for Brad, and then I assume you're going to have to spin off and do some TV things here. But we had a question going back to what Frank was showing us about how different model runs have different things. And it says, why is the track so high on the NAM versus the HER? And I just realized we haven't talked about the different tracks and how that changes the different precip types.
Yeah, it's an interesting track all around. I'll be honest with you because normally a low that comes out of Texas like this would dive a little deeper along the Gulf Coast, and it would eventually go up the East Coast. You know, like a Miller B type setup. This has got some hints of a Miller A, but it's like suppressed. It's like a really weird track. I haven't seen one like this in a long time. That where it kind of comes and then opens up a little bit. It honestly, the track is kind of in between 2 and 3 there on my map. But the air is so cold that it really doesn't matter as far as the snow. But normally we'd see that track one where it kind of would go up the East Coast. I honestly think it's going to go kind of out to sea the way some of the guidance looks. It just kind of takes off and goes out. So it is a very unique setup. Now the thing about snow in the southeast, and this is the most frustrating thing for snow lovers, is you've got to be this needle, right? You've got to be close enough to the warm air to get enough moisture, but not close enough that it's all rain. You can't be too far north where it's cold enough, but it's then too dry where you don't get much snow. So you got to kind of be right on that precipice of like, ooh, is it sleet, rain, snow? But it's all snow and it's moist enough and it's warm enough that you're getting that warm air advection that's throwing snow into the area. So that's another reason that it's so hard to get snow down here is like you gotta thread the needle there with that track and be just close enough to the moisture and warm air, but not too close that you get all rain. So yeah, it's the track is always key around here. But the one thing we have that haven't had in a long time, honestly, is just this big trough and cold air over the eastern half of the country. And the last storm that came through actually is helping us. It's produced a big snowpack from the Midwest into the Mid Atlantic, which is helping to keep the air mass over us cold. It's not allowing it to modify as much as it normally would over bare ground. Um, One of the things that really helps establish cold air over long periods of time is snowpack to our north. So if we get snow over the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Northeast, then when these hot Arctic highs come out of Canada, they stay over what like I like to call refrigerated ground, right? The ground's cold, so it keeps the air cold. And so that allows the cold air to spill much further south than it normally would. If that ground is bare or not snow covered, then it gives time for that air mass to modify. And it's kind of the reason why we haven't seen a lot of cold and snow the last couple of years. The snowpack and ice in general across Canada, even in the northern tier of our states, has just been abnormally low. It just has not been there.
Yeah, I can see the soil temperatures that you put on social here
Yeah,
recently. And I also wanted to show. Let me find my tab here again. There's a great map. That is a great map, but not the one I was looking for. Oh, I like this one because this
yeah,
is a new from the Weather Service this year, if memory serves, and it doesn't talk about how much snow. It doesn't talk about how much ice. This is just
yeah.
purely impact based. These are the
Yes.
areas that will be impacted by winter weather, which I know, Brad, is all what you guys are about. So as we wind down our time talking
Yeah.
about snow, what can people expect from Brad Panovich and the WCNC Weather Impact Team there in Charlotte?
Yeah, so we'll be all over it on Friday. We're going to be probably streaming and doing cut-ins in the middle of the afternoon. We're try to be ahead of this. So, because people get most excited like when it starts, right? And like where is the snow now so I can kind of get home or get to where I can. So, I think the goal right now is on 2 o'clock, around 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. We'll start streaming on WCNC Plus, which is available on our app, our website, Roku, Apple, Amazon, all those places, YouTube. You can stream us. And then we'll be on TV from 4 to 6:30, and then streaming after that as well. The whole goal is to kind of track the progress of the snow, and the big story is kind of tell people how the roads are. Speaking of the impacts, is like what's it like out there? The one thing I would tell you is don't get caught up in just the snow maps because a lot of people, even if you're from the north, you're going to say 1 to 2 inches isn't a big deal. I can tell you through experience, no matter what part of the country it is, if you get 1 to 2 inches of snow on a cold ground, cold air mass during rush hour, it always causes
There you are.
problems.
There
Yeah,
you go.
so I pulled out the snow jams. That's Atlanta, 1 inch of snow. Kids had to spend the night in schools and didn't get taken home to the next day. That's Birmingham. Same year, I think, or the year before. And then Raleigh had their snow jam. Most of it an inch to 1 to 2 inches during rush hour. And the combination of everybody getting on the roads while it's snowing under cold conditions creates complete gridlock. And so it's called a snow jam because it's a traffic jam with snow and people literally get trapped in their cars overnight. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to avoid Friday. And that's why I don't often say this, but if you can be where you need to be before rush hour on Friday and
Yeah.
just stay put because me personally, if I didn't have to work, I don't want to be anywhere near the roads just because of all the people and trying to get through that mess on Friday evening. So that's what we're going to try to keep you ahead of that. So hopefully people will heed our warning. It is a Friday night, which is unique in general because people like to go out on Friday night. They don't have to work on Saturday. Most people, unlike us who have crazy schedules. But that's why it's probably a good idea if it's a Friday night, you can leave work early or leave school early and get home and stay there for the night. That would be the best thing to do. The other thing I will tell you, a lot of folks hit the grocery stores this time of year. Snowstorms are not great for restaurants because they lose a lot of business. So if you can, maybe be a good patron and maybe order takeout this weekend after the storm goes through, and help those restaurants who are going to probably take a hit in their Friday night business.
And tip well if you're going to make
Yes,
delivery
because
drivers bring you
those
stuff.
poor people had to go to work and that stuff too.
Yeah, my goodness, my
We
goodness.
all Yeah, that's the thing. Like not a lot of people. A lot of people are going to have to work in this. So, bosses out there, have grace on your employees, please, because it is not the greatest thing to be driving in.
Well, Brad, it's always a pleasure to talk to you there at WCNC Charlotte. We know some of you are still watching on Tim Buckley's page there in Facebook. We had him on earlier in the show. He's the chief meteorologist at WFMY in Greensboro. We're going to get to some other headlines here as we roll on with the Carolina Weather Group, and we know those guys will have their latest forecast coming up at 11 o'clock. But bit of a hard pivot, but I know, Frank, this was on your list of things we definitely needed to talk about tonight, which is the fires burning in California tonight. At least 5 active fires burning thousands of acres outside of Los Angeles, 0% containment. These are wind-driven fires that are just devastating and forcing the evacuation of thousands of residents. This is the latest information you can see on your screen right here from Cal Fire. Cal Fire, a name that will be familiar to anyone who is a active subscriber of the Carolina Weather Group, because they were with us when we went to Chester County, South Carolina earlier this year, where the IBHS right here in the Carolinas was doing an experiment. We were able to witness it for our 500th episode of the Carolina Weather Group. You can see some of that video playing on your screen right now. But this was on my mind today, guys, as they were talking about how the wind was driving these flames from one house to another. They actually did a controlled experiment with IBHS, with Caltech, with Cal Fire right here in South Carolina to study how winds spread from home to home, how those embers jump from home to home. IBHS with their hurricane force wind tunnel cranking up. This on your screen right now is just 35 miles an hour. And Frank, I know that we've been seeing tropical storm, hurricane force winds in California way beyond what they did in their controlled experiment here. It's mind-boggling.
Indeed, some of those peak winds out in California have been up as high as 100 miles an hour. It's been a very intense high wind event out there. They call them Santa Ana winds out there, and that's a similar thing that happens in a lot of places around the country and around the world. Central California, they call them Diablos. They call them Chinooks in the northern plain states. And other parts of the world have similar situations. But the basic thing is that when you have an area of high pressure that settles into the western states and becomes centered close to the Great Basin, and a storm system that's in a position like what you're seeing now over Mexico, things line up just right for those high winds to occur. And James, if we switch over to my screen share here again, we'll look at where things are on satellite view. This is the storm that has been responsible for those Santa Ana winds, and it's also the same storm that's going to be our storm that brings us the winter weather here on Friday and Friday night. But right now it's centered over northwestern Mexico, and again, we have an area of high pressure over the plain states. I'll switch over to the Storm Prediction Center's mesoanalysis page to help quantify this a little bit better. Again, high pressures here out over the western states, the interior. Lower pressures are down here over Mexico, and air flows from high pressure to low pressure, deflected a little bit by the Earth's spin, the Coriolis effect. And so that's how the wind is, why the wind travels that way. It comes out of the east to northeast, sometimes north-northeast. And of course, the closer these lines of equal pressure isobars are together, the stronger the pressure gradient is and the stronger the winds are. This is the way things look right now, with the pressure gradient fairly steep and some gusty winds still occurring out there. But 24 hours ago, it looked like this. Look how close together those isobars are, which means that there was a very strong pressure gradient. That's the reason why those winds were so strong out there. And in addition to that, the wind has to flow through mountains out there and over mountains. And that's one of the main components to the Santa Ana winds there in California, in that the winds have to go over and through mountains, and where they go between mountain gaps or through canyons, they get funneled through there, and that results in the winds getting accelerated and the air flowing faster, and you get stronger winds there as a result. Same kind of thing that happens in a city somewhere, Charlotte, Raleigh, Columbia, Greer, Greenville, New York. The buildings do the same kind of thing on a much smaller scale. The wind will flow faster between the buildings than it would out in the open somewhere if the wind's parallel to those buildings. Well, the same kind of thing happens again in the mountains, and that results in the winds flowing really fast through those canyons out there, and that's how you get these really strong winds in the Santa Ana situations like what we're having yesterday through today, and hopefully winding down over the next 24 hours out there, because the wildfires that have been fanned, not necessarily caused, a lot of these wildfires are caused by humans doing silly things or nefarious things out there, and results in a fire starting in a situation where it spreads rapidly due to these high winds. So it's a really tragic situation. My understanding is that there have been literally thousands of homes burned down, in some cases entire neighborhoods out there in California around Pacific Palisades and Santa Monica, that general area just west of Los Angeles. So that's how the situation happens, and that's the reason why they're dealing with those horrible wildfires out there in California now.
Yeah, we've heard, unfortunately, at least 5 deaths, a number that has climbed slowly throughout the day as thousands of people are trying to evacuate. We know not everyone is able to get out. We're looking at a time-lapse video today from just outside of Los Angeles. We know this camera says UC San Diego on it. I'm sure it's cooperative, but this is not San Diego. This is outside Los Angeles, as Frank's been telling you. And, the winds have been absolutely astounding. They actually decreased enough today that fire operations were able to start using planes. You actually just saw one go by right there to help, but that was not available in the onset of this fire. And you can see just how much of the earth is scorched here by not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4, maybe 5 of these wildfires. I actually appreciated the candidness today of the Los Angeles County fire chief. He was asked in a news conference whether or not they were prepared for it, and his answer was no fire department is prepared for 4 major simultaneous wildfires. He's not saying they weren't prepared for 1 or 2. They were, in his words, but this magnitude, this quickly, is putting a strain not only on personnel, but also, as we've heard in reports, water pressure has been a problem. The roads have been a problem. They were literally using bulldozers to move abandoned cars out of the way to get other residents out, to get other emergency vehicles back in. It is an absolutely unfortunate disaster unfolding right now just outside of Los Angeles, with 4 wildfires burning in Southern California. We'll continue to keep an eye on it. Scotty Powell in Myrtle Beach has thoughts here.
Yeah, I actually am watching one of the Los Angeles stations right now on the TV beside me, and now there's a new fire, Sunset Fire, which is on Hollywood Hills. If you know where the big Hollywood side is, that area now forcing evacuations, and looking at downtown LA is complete gridlock right now with people trying to get out of the area. So unfortunately, another big fire has popped up this evening there in the greater Los Angeles area.
And, air quality is also a major concern. Take a look at this camera here. You can see all of the smoke in the sky. And so as people are trying to evacuate themselves, their animals, you can even see it here in the daylight video as we take a look at another time lapse. This is a story that's going to be playing out for some time. And it was interesting for me to think about today how we shot our 500th episode of the Carolina Weather Group. We just so happened to be there at IBHS on the same day that Caltech and Cal Fire were doing this experiment. Previous experiments, I'm sure, helped them prepare for today. The experiment they did in September will help them with knowledge going forward, because so much of what they study here in South Carolina helps them set building codes. How far apart do these homes need to be as we're watching flames today spread from one home to the next? But again, that experiment that we watched in September, guys, it was 35 mile per hour winds. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that is an intense wind speed, that is intense heat. Even that one home that we were standing next to in a controlled environment, the smoke, I can't imagine with thousands of acres, hundreds of homes, and hurricane force winds. Even just watching it, as Scotty mentioned on TV, it's hard to fathom. And um, we got private homes, we got private businesses, and we've got landmarks. Scotty mentioned the Hollywood sign. There's the Getty Museum. Uh, we'll have to wait to see exactly the extent of these fires is as the situation continues to play on out. But please keep the folks of Southern California in mind.
One of the things that you don't always hear from people outside of California is also is the what's in the smoke too, especially with these kinds of houses and stuff burning, computers and other stuff in the air. I know when we had the Soratown mountain fire, which is near Pilot Mountain, and I've covered a number of other house fires like that too. Like, you gotta be really careful what's in that smoke, because it's not just wood and trees; it's whatever's inside a house, and you don't know what's it could be cancer causing chemicals and stuff like that. So that's another thing too that not everybody thinks about, is just what's in the air and the air quality that it causes, which is more widespread than the actual fire itself. So
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So we hope that something shifts over these next few days. We've seen the winds, decrease from where they were 12, 24 hours ago, and that hopefully will give firefighters a chance to start getting some of these contained. But as you're taking a look at some of the visuals just from today alone, it's absolutely, absolutely jaw dropping. We know closer to home here in the Carolinas, we are still recovering from the impacts of Hurricane Helene. All of those months ago, all those weeks ago, it is not lost on us. And as we've promised you here at the Carolina Weather Group, we want to keep you up to date with the latest on the ongoing recovery. Joseph was telling us earlier about the newly elected Governor Josh Stein of North Carolina. He signed a few executive orders since taking office at the start of the new year. We've got them summarized here for you. They have temporarily waived some regulations when it comes to emergency housing. He's also eased some restrictions on the movement of propane and other heating fuels into Western North Carolina. He is ordering some procurement restrictions being waived to allow faster action on getting transportation. We know road and rails has been a big problem. And the thing I'm interested to see how it plays out, guys, is his new office, Grow NC, inside his governor's office, a new dedicated recovery office separate from that of Matthew and Florence, because we've seen reports of criticism for victims of hurricanes Matthew and Florence all of these years later, still waiting for their homes to be rebuilt. And so Governor Stein electing to essentially make a new office separate from that one to focus on Western North Carolina. We also did learn in the last couple of days the names of the 104 people who died from Helene in North Carolina. Those names have been published online. These are the names of the people who in North Carolina perished during the storm. It's a hard list to read. It's an important list to read because it reminds us that when we're talking about the storm and we're talking about the impacts, these are real people with real families and people who were missed during the holiday season and here start of the new year. You can see that list on your screen right now from multiple counties across the Carolinas, 104 in North Carolina, over 300 across the Southeast. We know over 30 people died in South Carolina as well, too. But this is the first time since the storm that this list, which was compiled by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, has been released. And we're scrolling those names again on the screen for you right now, as captured here on WCNC.com, just so we can again show you the names of the 104 people who perished in that storm. And Scotty Powell, I know your family back up in the foothills of North Carolina heading into this first winter here post-storm. We know there's lots of talk about keeping people warm as we head into these abnormally cold times.
Yeah, that and over the weekend, I spoke with my buddy William Keller, emergency manager for McDowell County. And if you've been watching this show for a long time, you probably seen William on here a few times, and the times that I was up in McDowell County covering fires, we were there on site and
Yeah.
provided some video. But anyway, William and I was talking, and he said to this. Actually, I'm just going to read the text message because I don't want to get words twisted. But give me a second to pull it up here.
Yeah. No, sure.
He said these people are still finding housing very difficult because it was a shortage of supplies and stuff pre-storm, and now folks are still not having places to be able to find residence at, because there's so many people impacted in such many areas across Western North Carolina that the supplies are being distributed out to all these different places. And we were actually talking about this upcoming week's snowstorm, and he said right now, if we had a severe winter storm, it would just be crippling, because they're still out there every day looking for debris and picking that up and helping people pick up their lives, basically. So just they're still neck deep. He says, quote unquote, neck deep in recovery operations. So that's just kind of what's going on up there.
We know in some of the recent heavy rains, we got nothing compared to Helene, right? Which dumped a foot or more of rain in some places, but even just 1, 2, 3 inches of rain was enough recently to set back some of those recovery efforts, as people had been kind of homegrown establishing bridges, foot bridges or small vehicle bridges to connect their homes back to the mainland. And a lot of those got washed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should say a lot of those, but we saw pictures of those being washed away. And now that's another thing that people got to go back out and do.
Correct. And there's still small communities that are still kind of disconnected, because that was the only way in and out of going to town to get supplies that are needed. So it's still such a recovery effort, and cameras go away after a while and attention turns to other things, and these things are still happening, and not saying it's put in the back of people's minds, but obviously life goes on for everyone, and everyone has things they have to deal with. So the people who continue to suffer, their problems are still there. And we had so much attention on it, a month and a half out, that now that we're past the holiday season and the depths of winter, they still need help. I just saw today some areas near the Asheville area are giving out all sorts of heating supplies, like propane tanks or kerosene heaters or things like that, just because of the cold weather that's moving in. And as Brad said earlier, these people don't have adequate places to stay. Still, some are staying in these like shed type things where, not the best insulated at all. You likely feel breezes if the wind's heavy enough, and just not ideal at all. So they're still neck deep in recovery efforts, and so any and all help that can be provided to them would be much needed and much wanted, and much they would be thankful for.
We know Brad and I and lots of other folks, Dan Whitaker among them, had a chance to go to Chimney Rock and Lake Lore right before the blessing of the Christmas season, to help remind those folks that we were still thinking of them. They held a Christmas market to try to help the economy. And as Scotty mentioned, we are now past that Christmas season, and their economy still needs help. And so while some of these places, the bigger tourism places, the ski places, might really be loving this upcoming snow that's coming in, there are artists and small businesses and restaurants and hotels that would still love to see you if there's a safe way to do that. Because I know it was just heart-wrenching when we went up there here for episode 517 of our show at the end of December, to kind of see some of this stuff firsthand over there on our YouTube channel. And, Scotty, I think you're exactly right when you talk about, keeping this not back of mind, but front of mind. That's why here tonight, as we are talking about the joy of snow returning to the Carolinas, we're making it a point of bringing this forward here because every week we do want to just make sure we're keeping the finger on the pulse of the ongoing Helene recovery.
And it's how do I word this? Everybody, I think all of us are snow geeks. We love snow, but it may not be as special this year as maybe it would be in years past, if that makes sense. Just because what people are suffering through.
Yeah, I know not everyone is going to have the opportunity to sit back and enjoy it in ways they may have in the past. As we wind down this episode of the Carolina Weather Group, we'll show those snow totals again one more time, starting Friday, overnight into Saturday morning. 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 inches of locally heavier snow amounts there in the western North Carolina mountains, as Scotty was just mentioning. Snow could come as far south as 85, a little south of Interstate 85. We'll pop some of the South Carolina totals up on your screen. You can see there's a chance that South Carolina could get some of the snow, and that would be good news for me in Matthews because I would like some snow here on the south side of Charlotte. But we'll be watching that rain snow line, as we call it, to find out exactly what might turn over to other forms of wintry precipitation, including the chance that we could see some ice here. You can see the map on your screen right now, maybe a tenth of an inch in ice from Columbia, from Florence, and north along that I-20 corridor. And we'll show you some of that also possible in North Carolina, and that's where some of those impacts could certainly be felt. Here at the Carolina Weather Group, we will be streaming, tracking the snow all throughout the weekend. You can find us over on YouTube and watch us wherever it is that you watch YouTube. Thanks again to Tim Buckley and Brad Panovich, who you can find on the WFMY Plus and the WCNC Plus app. But Frank Strait, Joseph Niven, the back of Scotty Powell's head. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight, and hope to see everyone back for live snow coverage on Friday and Saturday right here from the Carolina Weather Group. But as Scotty mentioned, stay safe, stay warm. There's Weather Kitty, and we hope to see you again back here real soon for more from the Carolina Weather Group. Be well. Wait, hang on a second. I forgot one thing. The Carolina Weather Group is proud this year to be partnering with Girls Who Chase, and they're going to be having their upcoming spring seminar, and we wanted to share this with you.
Hi, podcast listeners. If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd love to start storm chasing, but I have no idea how to get started. Believe me, you're not alone. You can kick off your chasing adventure with Girls Who Chase on March 1st, 2025 at the Storm Chasing 101 training event we call Spring Training. The annual Spring Training event, and yes, the pun is intended, provides accessible, entry-level, and foundational information and training material for storm chasers at all levels. Spring trainees will range from those who want to begin their chase education or brush up on the basics, to more advanced chasers who want to learn more about in-depth specialized topics. Just like in baseball, we gather every spring to shake off the rust, refresh our skills, and get ready to hit a home run. Spring training is provided in partnership with the leading meteorology education organization, ComEt's MedEd program. This allows for the program to always be held virtually and remain affordable. Girls Who Chase is a global community, and we believe strongly in making science and learning accessible to everyone without the constraints of travel or financial hardship. And if you can't make it on March 1st, don't worry. All presentations will be recorded and made permanently available to registrants. To register and for information on the topics, speakers, and schedule as they become available, visit our website, girlswhochase.com/spring training. That's girlswhochase.com/spring training for more information. We hope to see you there.
All right, there again. There's the website on your screen. We'll be talking to Jen Walton right here on the Carolina Weather Group coming up in the next few weeks. I wanted to make sure we got that in tonight amongst all the snow, fire, and Helen talk because that's a very cool educational opportunity that we wanted to let our Carolina Weather Group fans know about. So again, we'll see you back here on Friday for live snow coverage from the Carolina Weather Group. Until then, be well.